Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of Studio Albums Ranked. Today we're going to be talking about the new wave band from America from the 1980s, Wall of Voodoo. Can we call them new wave? Can we call them dark wave? They're a really unique band, and if you only know this band from the song Mexican Radio, I really encourage you to have a watch of this video and get to know this band a little better, because I think they're a wonderful band. There's so much more to them than that one hit. In fact, they had 2 hits here in Australia, but we'll get into that. They only had 4 studio albums. They did an EP before their first studio album, and then they did a live album after their last studio album. But they were really only around during the 80s. They started off in the late 70s as a soundtrack company, funnily enough. They were doing soundtracks for sort of Z-grade movies, and they were making this strange, weird music in their little studio. And the name Wall of Voodoo came around because Stan Ridgway, the original lead singer, was playing some of the music to somebody he knew, and he was telling them that he was going for a sort of a wall of sound type of production, like a Phil Spector wall of sound. And his friend commented that it sounded more like a wall of voodoo, and the name stuck. They ended up writing some songs, starting to do some gigs around the Los Angeles area and further out, and eventually they did 4 albums for IRS Records, although their EP was on an independent label called Index. So I wanted to do this not just to do the rankings, because there are only 4 albums, so it's a fairly short catalogue, but I just really wanted to talk about this band because they are a band that I've loved since I was a kid, and I just wanted to share my love of this band with you and hopefully show you that there's a lot more to this band than just that one novelty hit that everybody seems to know them for, if they know them at all. Anyway, let's start off with my number 4. I should say I love all 4 of these albums, so just because this one's at number 4 doesn't mean I don't love this album. I really do. I should say before we get into the ranking too, there's sort of 2 eras, or 2 eras of this band, because they started off with Stan Ridgway on vocals, keyboards and harmonica, Mark Moreland on guitar, his brother Bruce Moreland on bass and keyboards, Chaz T. Gray on keyboards and synthesizers, and Joe Nannini on percussion. And in those early days, Joe Nannini didn't really play a standard drum kit, as it were. What they would often do is they would have a drum machine that would set the basic beat, and then Joe Nannini would play percussion over the top of that. But his percussion, a lot of it was sort of found objects rather than traditional drums. So it would be pots and pans and sort of pieces of sheet metal and things like that he would make these wonderful sounds with. And it gave them a unique sound. But after they played the US Festival in 1983, the band kind of broke in half, and Stan Ridgway and Joe Nannini left, and they got in Andy Preboy on vocals and keyboards, wonderful singer, really good songwriter as well, and Ned Lukehart on drums, and he played a more traditional drum kit. So it did change their sound a little bit, although, as I say, these Andy Preboy albums are still really good. I do have a preference for the Stan Ridgway stuff, as we will see, but that doesn't mean I don't love the Andy Preboy stuff too, because I really, really do. So let's get into it. My number 4 is their 3rd album from 1985, and that is 7 Days in Sammy's Town. This album actually has the other song that was a big hit in Australia. In fact, it was a slightly bigger hit in Australia than Mexican Radio was, and that is the song Far Side of Crazy. And it is one of the best songs that Wall of Voodoo ever did from either era. incredible song. There's other good songs on here, like Business of Love I really like. Room with a View is fabulous. Blackboard Sky is good. Big City. They do a cover of Dark as a Dungeon. Tragic Vaudeville and Don't Spill My Courage end the album, and they're really good album closers. I only rank this one slightly lower because I feel like they're still sort of finding a new sound after Stan Ridgway and Joe Nannini had left the band. They still wrote some really good songs though. I like their next album a little bit better, and that's why I'm ranking it at number 3 from 1987, their last album, Happy Planet, or their last studio album I should say. Starts off with an incredible cover of the Beach Boys' Do It Again. They did great covers. On their original EP, before their first album, the standout track on that album is an incredible cover version of Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash. Well worth seeking out and listening to. It's one of my favourite cover versions of all time. Their cover version here of Do It Again is wonderful too. In the video clip for it, they actually managed to get Brian Wilson to do a cameo in it, which I think is just absolutely brilliant. Hollywood the Second Time is a really good song. Empty Room, When the Lights Go Out, Country of Man, Joanne. Then you get the wonderful song Elvis Bought Dora a Cadillac, which is apparently based on a true story, where Elvis and his crew went out to this restaurant and Dora was their waitress for the night. And as they were leaving, he tipped her the keys to a Cadillac, a brand new Cadillac. Just incredible. I love that story. The Grass is Greener is great, and Ain't My Day is a wonderful album closer as well. Really good album. Now the last two of the two Stan Ridgway era albums, they are my two favourite Wall of Voodoo albums, and it was really hard to decide which one I liked better than the other. This could change from day to day depending on when you ask me, but for today, my number 2 is going to be their debut album from 1981, Dark Continent. Incredible album. The sound of this album is sort of dark, brooding synthesizers mixed with twangy Western guitar and the sound of sort of Ennio Morricone's spaghetti Western soundtracks. It's an incredible mix. No other band sounded like Wall of Voodoo, either in the Andy Preboy era or the Stan Ridgway era. There really is no other band that sounds like Wall of Voodoo as far as I'm concerned. So many good songs on this album. Red Light opens the album and it's an incredible song. There's so many other good songs on here too. This Way Out, Good Times, Tsetse Fly, Me and My Dad, Back in Flesh is an incredible song. There was a CD that was released as a compilation which had the EP, which was released before this album, on it, and then a bunch of live tracks that were kind of roughly recorded. And they do a version of Back in Flesh on this album. And Stan Ridgway introduces it by saying, "This song is called Back in Flesh. It's about going to work, I think." As if he doesn't even know what his own song is about. Stan Ridgway wrote wonderful lyrics that really tell little stories within each sort of 3 or 4 minute song. And I love that about him, and I love that about this band. And Back in Flesh definitely tells a story. Call Box 123 was the single off this album, and it's a song I really, really love. Every song on this album is great. Animal Day, wonderful stuff. But for today, my number 1 is going to be their second album from 1982, and that is Call of the West. Now, I was introduced to this band by Mexican radio. I saw the film clip for that. I fell in love with the song. I went out and I bought the single. The B-side of Mexican Radio was the title track from this album, Call of the West. And I played the B-side probably more than the A-side. I think it is the single best Wall of Voodoo song I've ever heard. If you only know this band from Mexican Radio, go and have a listen to this album, and particularly the title track, Call of the West. It's an incredible song and it tells an incredible story. But all the songs on this album are really good. It may not quite be as consistent an album as Dark Continent, but I think the highs on this album are higher than they are on Dark Continent. Tomorrow is an incredible song. Then you get the wonderful ballad Lost Weekend. And if you think that the sort of description I gave of the music, sort of, you know, dark synthesizers with Western twangy guitar and Ennio Morricone style spaghetti Western music, doesn't really sound like it should work well in a ballad, it absolutely does. And Lost Weekend is a wonderful, it's very dark lyrically too. Factory, another song that he writes about sort of a working schlub and his sort of workaday life, and he makes it compelling. It's incredible. Look at Their Way is good. Hands of Love I really like. Mexican Radio. Don't just think of that song as a novelty song. It is actually a really good song, and the lyric tells about sort of radio stations that you would pick up if you were living close to the border between the United States and Mexico. You'd pick up these Mexican radio stations and they would be playing this strange music, and of course they would be speaking in Spanish, and it's a great little story, and it's a wonderful song. It's catchy as hell. Spy World and You Don't Want Me, They Don't Want Me, sorry, are good songs, but they're not sort of the standout songs on this, I don't think. On Interstate 15 is a great instrumental, and then you get Call of the West to close the album out. Just an incredible, incredible song. Lyrically, musically, the way it's sung, everything about it. Just, I love that song to death. So that's my ranking of the Wall of Voodoo albums. To go through them again, at number 1, we have Call of the West. At number 2, Dark Continent. At number 3, Happy Planet. And at number 4, but by no means least, 7 Days in Sammy's Town. So if you are a Wall of Voodoo fan, let me know in the comments how you would rank these albums. Which ones are your favourites? Which songs are your favourites? Are you an Andy Preboy guy? Are you a Stan Ridgway guy? Do you love them both? Love to hear it. I love reading the comments. If you've never listened to Wall of Voodoo before, please go to your listening app of choice and give them a check. Give them a listen. Check them out. I definitely recommend starting with the album Call of the West and the song Call of the West. Great stuff. Please like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please have a look at some of my other videos. I do lots of studio albums rank shows, and I have a playlist for those. Everything is playlisted on the channel. So if you want to look at my anniversary album shows, there's a playlist for that. If you want to look at my reviews, playlist for that. Favorite albums of all time, in defense of shows, etc. All playlisted. I've got about 40 odd videos on the channel now, so there's plenty for you to go and have a look at if you are new to the channel. If you want to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, I'm at bicyclelegs. On Instagram, I'm mostly posting the albums I happen to be listening to at the time, as well as channel updates. On Twitter, I talk about anything and everything, but I am definitely trying to give that more of a music focus. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.